pain management has been overdue for an overhaul for far too long. Nima Farzan is keen to change that paradigm. I'm Ben Comer.
And I'm Matt Pillar.
And this is the Business of Biotech JP Morgan 2025 edition.
We are here in San Francisco at the beautiful law offices of Alston and Bird with Nima, CEO at Latigo Biotherapeutics, and one of the most enthusiastic CEOs, I might add, that we've known to discuss his small biotech's intent on taking a big primary care problem in a biotech space that's often focused on very small and expensive problems. Thank you, Nima, for joining us.
My pleasure. I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. You've spent 5.5 years now leading groups and marketing at Novartis before jumping into biotech and venture capital. So whenever, we often have biotech execs on the show who come from big pharma and jump into a biotech endeavor, and I'm always curious about the motivation to do so. So what was yours?
Yeah, I grew up in the Bay Area. And so I grew up at a time when, who you looked up to were the innovators in Silicon Valley and tech. Both of my parents were in tech. Mm-hmm. And so I always wanted to be actually on the more innovative small company side. I actually did it before business school. I was at a genomics company in the sort of early .com boom timeframe. Decided to go to business school and then realized for me to be truly successful in this industry, I need to learn. It's a really complicated thing, drug development. You've got to learn it. And what better place to learn it than one of the big pharma companies that, they know how to do these things. So I went to Novartis with the intention to learn the business, learn drug development. Actually ended up loving it and staying longer than I thought. I thought it'd be a check the box, couple of years, come back. And it was actually about 7 years before I was like, no, I want to get back to what I've always wanted to do, which is something more entrepreneurial, something more innovative. And I came out of Novartis with, I think the beginnings of understanding how to do drug development. It's a lifelong process, but I got the basics so that I could go into biotech and apply that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How did your time at Foresight Capital prepare you for the rigors of biotech building?
Yeah, I spent a couple stints as an executive resident at Foresight in between different CEO roles. And what I will tell you is that it confirmed to me that I'm not a venture capitalist. I like to build companies, right? So it's funny when you're sitting there and you're seeing companies several a day come and pitch, and invariably your reaction is like, that's really cool. I'd love to get in deep on that and help build that and figure that out and drive that. But as a venture capitalist, on to the next and on to the next. So it was great, pull up and kind of see the broader picture, what's going on in the industry, see trends, but also just reconfirms that what I want to do is build companies and develop drugs. And so it's a great relationship with Foresight. I've worked with them a couple times now. They show me exciting things in their portfolio. When I get excited, I jump in.
It probably helped you improve your pitches too, I would imagine.
Oh, for sure. You see how it's interpreted on the back end, how it's discussed on the back end, what resonates, what doesn't. That it was very helpful.
Have any of your stints at Foresight overlapped with Vic Bajaj's time there?
Yes, yeah.
He was on the podcast pre-JPM, and not too long ago, just a few weeks before he came to JPM. He was a guest on the podcast. Fascinating.
He's a great guy, incredibly smart.
Incredibly smart, intimidatingly smart.
Yes.
Yeah. So we had the luxury of a conversation with you a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things that you said that is not necessarily clairvoyant, but it's proving true in the conversations that I'm having with plenty of founders, biotech founders and builders here at the show, in all sorts of modalities. You said that you believe that we as an industry are on the cusp of a renewal of drugs for the masses.
Yes.
Which, in the last several years, Ben, we've been covering this space, and there's been a ton, especially in the ATMP arena, there's been a ton of interest in, ultra rare and rare disease. But even in those ATMP spaces, like at this show, I've had so many conversations with folks who are doing genetic therapies, for instance, who want to pursue big giant indications, which is awesome. The indication you're working in has a super big opportunity. Yeah. But getting back to the point about, this being on the cusp of an era of drug for the masses, what are the indicators for you? What's indicating that for you? Why do you say that?
Why do I say that? Well, I think a couple of things. So, things are cyclical, right? And for a long time, rare diseases were ignored. because people didn't think there was a business model. And so a lot of it, and then that became an opportunity. People started investing there. There were successes, and there was more and more in rare disease. And at some point, the pendulum has to swing back, right? We've now ignored R&D investment in some of the larger opportunities. And, frankly, the obesity space and some of the, GLP-1s have really helped drive the fact back that you can actually have very impactful drugs that can be meaningful for people's health across very broad populations, that there still is a lot of unmet need and a commercial opportunity if you can develop those compounds. So I think it's been part of it is just the pendulum and cycling back, and some of it has been the specific successes in obesity that have opened people's eyes to there really is still a lot of unmet need in some of these primary care segments.
Are there any incentives changing? Because obviously part of the reason that there has been this enormous focus on rare disease, aside from the unmet need, which we're acknowledging, is faster time to market, smaller trials, sometimes better IP protection. For the larger indication, more expensive trials, primary care drugs. Are there any kind of the dynamics that are shifting to help, prove your theory?
I wish that were more true on the R&D side. I think in pain, there are some specific things that are helpful. But in general, I don't necessarily can think of something. But what I will say is that some of the commercial incentives are changing. So if you think about what, I as we talked about when I was at Novartis and I was working in primary care, we had thousands of reps selling hypertensive drugs. And now we've gotten, frankly, away from those rep wars and, parallel lines and gotten better at using technology and different ways to access physicians so that you can actually commercialize primary care drugs with, a more reasonable, rational footprint. So that helps in terms of the NPV analysis, if you will. On drug development side, there's a lot of exciting technologies, and we can obviously talk about AI and regulatory innovation is important, but those are still fairly nascent. I mean, you're still having to do the safety studies and the larger scale studies that you need to do to access a primary care market.
One strategy that companies have used for years is to go after a really rare disease first and get on the market, and then of course expand the indication later, go for a larger population. Is that something that could happen in pain? Have you seen that kind of strategy?
Sure. In one very clear way, it's exactly how it's playing out. So it's not quite a super niche indication of pain, but acute pain versus chronic.
Okay.
Right. So acute pain, let's talk about, is primarily post-surgical. I've had a procedure, either it's my wisdom teeth taken out or knee repair or something larger, or it's some sort of severe non-surgical pain. I've sprained an ankle badly, I've thrown on my back or something like that. It's not a niche indication, but it is a much smaller indication than chronic pain, osteoarthritis, diabetic neuropathy, headache, muscle, lower back pain, et cetera. But the big advantage of acute pain relative to chronic pain, and the reason why it's a faster to market, it's a more tenable development plan for small companies as well as large companies, is the duration of treatment. It's limited. Typically when the FDA talks about acute pain, it's under 30 days. And often actually you're getting prescriptions that may be less, 2 weeks. And so when you're treating someone for that duration of time, there are a couple of things that make the development that much easier, right? So one, clearly, you don't have to have long studies. You can determine your endpoint in a couple of days. That's nice. And in fact, our first endpoint that you're going to look at is 15 minutes. We want to see onset of pain relief starting, ideally, maybe not at 15 minutes, but soon thereafter. So you start looking at 15 minutes. So you're getting an immediate readout. And because the duration of treatment isn't that long, the safety database you have to build for regulatory approval is less, right? You don't have to have year-long studies with patients because treating them for that kind of duration. So acute pain is where you would start as an opportunity if you have a broad-acting analgesic, like we believe we do. Acute pain is where you start because of that pathway is faster there. And it is a more limited market because these prescriptions are 2 weeks. They're not lifelong prescriptions because I have chronic pain.
Right. So why pain? That's a fundamental question we just kind of glossed straight over, right? Like, why did you
Why pain?
Yeah, why this company and why pain?
Yeah. I mean, do you know anyone who hasn't had pain.
I'm in pain as we speak.
Right, exactly. Right. It touches all of us, right? I mean, we all, it's almost, you know, it's
Not because of this conversation.
No, absolutely not.
No, it's physical. It was here before we got together.
That's good to know. I mean, pain touches all of us, and we've all been in pain at some point of our lives. We all will be in pain at some point of our lives. And when you look at patients who are dealing with chronic pain in particular, it is debilitating. It's very hard to focus, to function, and to operate in life. So, you know, I look back at my career, and I've worked, you know, the biotechs that I've run since my time at Novartis. One was in infectious disease and vaccines, one was in precision oncology. And what I liked about vaccines was this ability to impact a lot of people. Right? Vaccines are something that many people can take. But the tangible benefit of that vaccine is not obvious to the patient. I mean, if it works, they never get the disease and never think about it again. You don't get that direct impact. It's a theoretical impact you've made, and you kind of have to calculate it on many thousands of people taking your vaccine. Mm-hmm. So when I transitioned to the oncology side, you know, we're talking about patients with stage 4 terminal cancer that have run out of all other options. Many of them have diagnosed weeks left. And if your drug can reverse that tumor growth, have regression, and you can add months or years to that patient's life, I mean, that's an amazing, amazing impact that you can have immediately on someone who has no other options. But the fundamentals of that business are very rare types of cancer you're doing, we were doing, and the whole concept of precision is, you know, very genetically specific patient populations that, you know, might occur in 1% of the tumor type. And, you know, if that patient had that mutation, you may have a drug for them. So it's really small numbers of patients you're impacting. Pain gave me the opportunity to do both, to have something that you know, impacts, you know, everyone, but it also has a meaningful, tangible benefit to their lives immediately. And I mean, I say that, but we talked about within 15 minutes, 30 minutes, or 1 hour that you can help alleviate pain. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it doesn't take living in San Francisco to know that the opioid crisis has been a huge societal challenge. And the problem in pain is not a lack of efficacy for the drugs we have. We can completely eliminate your pain if you're willing to take enough morphine.
Yeah, right.
That's not the problem. The problem is, can you develop drugs that have that pain relief that are safe and tolerable? And what Latigo is working on has that opportunity, and, you know, really can create, you know, not just have a health impact like we've been talking about, but a positive socioeconomic, sociopolitical impact by helping eliminate, most likely reduce, the use of opioids.
How is that proposition being received by an investment community that has been enamored, you know, of late with ATMPs and super sexy fancy stuff? Right? not that yours isn't, right? But it's definitely a world away from, you know, gene therapies. And
it is, and for some, I will say, you know, we've had success, and there's definitely been investors who are, you know, very strong believers and supporters of this, and you know, you understand intuitively and immediately the patient need here and the rationale. But there are definitely investors who are used to saying, well, you know, there are generic drugs, i.e. generic opioids, and don't you have to have efficacy substantially better than the generic to get used? No, you don't, because people don't want to take an opioid. Patients don't want to take opioids. Physicians don't want to prescribe opioids. There's a lot of bureaucracy associated with tracking how many opioid prescriptions you have relative to the number of patients you're seeing, and reporting that you have to do state by state level. Governments don't want prescribers prescribing opioids. They want to limit it. They're creating incentives to move away from it and restrictions from going to it. So it is a little bit of a different mindset. This thing I talked about, which is, you know, the efficacy in pain is not the unmet need. It's the safety and tolerability. It's not how investors are used to thinking. They're used to thinking about, like, how are you more efficacious than the generic so that you'll get reimbursed?
Yeah.
And this is a different societal issue. I'd say most get it, but definitely some need some discussions around that.
Does that societal impact, that more, you know, global, broad societal impact, open up for you perhaps a new pocket or a different pocket of potential investment than traditional, you know, biotech pharma investors?
Yeah, I mean, it has. Here's what I would say: we have stuck to the more traditional investors. Now, there are certainly non-traditional investors that we can go to, But within the traditional investors, there are some that are a little more mission driven, and we have found that those do correlate in that respect. And I do think that there are some of our investors that look at that and say there are benefits here that we want to be a part of.
Yeah.
Pain is, famously hard to measure objectively.
Yes.
If you're in pain, but often, how much pain you're in is, which face you point to, on the pain chart. Do you feel that there's a need for, or maybe there are already some new kinds of scales or other types of objective measures to assess different types of pain? Have you worked on that at all?
Yeah, so there are a couple ways I'd answer that. There are studies that you can run that are going to be a little more objective or functional results. So I'll mention studies that are called cold pressure studies, right? And so what this type of study is you ask, in this case, it would be a healthy volunteer, to put their hand in a bucket of ice water that's 1 degree Celsius, see how long they can keep it in there, measure that as a baseline score. Give them a randomized either placebo or a drug and ask them to do it again and see how much longer they can keep their hand in that water. Now, it's the same level of pain stimulus, bucket of water at 1 degree, same person. How much difference does the drug versus placebo make on their ability to tolerate that? And you can measure that in seconds or percentage increase. That's more quantitative than a scale, right?
Yeah.
That's really a valuable tool for us. It's not a pivotal study. The FDA is not going to let you get your label based on that. You're still going to have to go into post-surgical pain or others. But it's a very valuable way to objectively test your drugs early on, and those are studies that we've done. The other thing I would say, which is less about endpoints, but protocol design to manage this issue. And there are things you can do, and you do this more in chronic pain studies than you would in acute, but you can decide which patients you want to enroll in your study based on, you did do a sort of a rolling screening period with patient diaries that they record their pain prior to entering your study. And you look for patients that are good pain responders, meaning they actually do understand, because not everyone can maybe conceptualize that pain and report it out. So do I consistently report scores? Is there some variability? Because if I say my pain is a 5, 5, 5, 5 every day, I'm probably not a good pain reporter. If I say 1, 10, 1, 10, I'm probably not a good pain reporter. So you want a little bit of variability, not too much. And we consider those patients good pain responders. And those are ones that maybe will give you a little bit better answer in your studies.
And you are doing those kinds of studies
Yes.
as well.
Yeah, that's interesting.
While you're on the studies subject, give us an update on where the studies are right now.
Yeah, we have a couple compounds that are in the clinic right now. Our first program is in phase 2 for acute pain. So this is the development we talked about, where in post-surgical pain. We're currently running that study, and we're doing that in a wisdom teeth extraction post-surgical pain patient population. Our second drug that we intend to develop for chronic pain is currently in phase 1.
My dentist growing up had a sign on the office door that said modern dentistry is painless. So I'm not sure,
There's no issues.
when I had the wisdom teeth taken out, it proved that theory wrong, of course. So yeah. So what are the next steps then?
So the next steps after that, on the acute side, you move into pivotal studies. And pivotal studies, from a regulatory pathway, the agency would like to see one post-surgical study in patients who have had soft tissue surgery and one efficacy study in patients who've had hard tissue surgery or bony tissue. So typically where we've evolved to, different models have been used over time, but today most people will do abdominoplasty and bunionectomy as the soft tissue and hard tissue studies. So you go into patients having those surgeries and you would run the studies in that. And that is the efficacy studies you need to run for an acute indication. Chronic, you have a lot more options. There's a lot of different types of chronic pain. Roughly I bucket it as neuropathic pain or musculoskeletal pain. And our focus is going to be in the musculoskeletal side, in particular, where we started with osteoarthritis.
I think everyone recognizes the unmet need for new pain medications, non-opioids. Even regulators, I think, would recognize that. Or do you anticipate any sort of accelerated regulatory pathway, breakthrough designation, anything like that?
I would hope that and believe that the agency will work with us in a number of parameters given the unmet need. I think it's too soon to speculate on whether you would have breakthrough designation specifically. But I will say that to date in our interactions with the FDA, they've been very forthcoming in providing good guidance for us. I do think the FDA wants to see non-opioid pain drugs developed, and so they've been very forthcoming.
Our friends at Alston & Bird set us up with some amazing space to record during JPM week. The firm's national healthcare and life sciences practice has more than 100 attorneys actively involved in the healthcare industry across the full spectrum of legal disciplines. The signature strength of this practice is its ability to master complex representations that draw on the coordinated expertise of its regulatory, compliance, public policy, transactional, corporate governance, securities, FDA, biotech, IP, government investigations, and litigation practice areas. Alston & Bird represents life sciences companies and their partners in corporate stages ranging from private to newly public to well-established, and in a variety of stages of product development from preclinical to post-approval commercial launch. Learn more at alston.com and tell them you learned about them on the Business of Biotech. Give us a sense for Latigo's, growth and I use the term like shape shifting as a biotech moves from R&D into a clinical stage into a potentially manufacturing environment. Where are you now?
Yeah.
On that, and sort of what have you had to grow through in your time there?
No, I mean, this is what I love talking about because this is what I've done the last few times, and this is where I think I can bring expertise to bear. Is how do you transition from a discovery company to a discovery and development company, and even to a late stage development company and early stage commercial company? I think that's kind of my sweet spot in been in my career.
I'm glad I asked.
Yeah. So I think, when I came in about 6 months ago, the company had primarily a discovery team in place, very strong discovery team that had developed multiple compounds that we've now taken into the clinic. But we're at literally the very initial stages of building development capabilities. So my focus has been primarily on scaling development. So when we say development, obviously that's clinical development, it's clinical operations, it's biometrics, it's regulatory. It is DMPK, ClinPharm, these kind of functions and capabilities, especially as you go beyond a phase 1 study and you need to start thinking about full development program. So that's been the people growth on the organization. That always has this interesting tension in biotech because, discovery will have been front and center for, in this case, 5 years, for however long the company's been around. And now they start to see the growth and development elsewhere. And part of what you have to do is make sure you're spending time letting the discovery team know that that's still a huge source of value today and in the future, and maintaining excitement and motivation there while most of the growth is happening on the development side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as far as that development side growth is concerned, what's it been like in your experience gearing up, staffing up? Like, have there been particular challenges to that end?
I've been really lucky in the sense that I think Latigo is very well positioned for everything we've talked about and the excitement around this class, that we've been able to attract great talent. I know that's not always the case. And I will say that, we're trying to bring in a mix of people with pain experience and not, right? And there isn't the depth of, companies working in pain to have a whole sort of people, a whole set of talent that have experience in pain.
Not many companies to snipe from, is that what you're saying? Like,
yeah, exactly,
away from.
Right? There's not as many, but there's also less competition, because coming from oncology, for example, right? If you're an MD, clinical development oncology experience, you're going to have 10 offers.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been, I think, lucky in being able to attract people who have pain expertise across different functions, even biometrics and the like. But then I've also been, cognizant about mixing in some people with capabilities in other therapeutic areas to augment this, right? Because as we think about the development. And what's been interesting is a lot of people will say, well, okay, you're in pain, so then you've got to go get CNS people. That's like the therapeutic area we kind of fall under. But the answer is we're actually not a CNS company, we're a peripheral neuroscience company. But it's a very different experience from if you've been working on degenerative disease, Parkinson's, dementia, et cetera. Actually, what I kind of want are people who've had more primary care, drug development experience, right? And really understand the drug-drug interaction work, the clinical pharmacology work, the scale up on the manufacturing side, et cetera, that we need for the kind of business that we run.
Yeah.
Tell us, Nima, about LTG 101, and how it works, maybe at a high level, if you would.
Sure. So LTG-001 is a NaV1.8 inhibitor. It's a small molecule oral compound, and it inhibits very selectively and potently NaV1.8. So what is NaV1.8? Why does that matter in pain? NaV1.8, in this case, NaV sodium voltage channel 1.8. There are 9 of these channels. We're targeting 1.8 very selectively. That's important because other NaV channels play other important roles in the body that you don't want to be interfering. But NaV1.8 is exclusively reserved by the body for the use of propagating the pain signal from the periphery back to the brain. And so whatever that pain signal may be, that could be an inflammatory pain signal like from prostaglandins or cytokines, it could be nociceptive from pressure, heat, cold, it could be neuropathic from glucose damage to the nerves. All those signals, that action potential, that electrical firing is carried through this sodium voltage channel that helps propagate that signal back to the brain. So inhibiting that channel can reduce the perception of pain that's coming from the periphery back to the brain. And if you do that selectively without hitting other sodium channels that play important roles in the body, like 1.1, 1.5, or 1.7, then you can have a very safe and effective drug.
Is there a danger then of the old like hand on the stove and not feeling it?
The frog in the boiling pot.
No, for a couple of reasons. One is, excuse me.
You thought maybe you caught Nima on that? Like, oh, wait a minute. I'll bet you didn't think about that.
No, I know we thought about it.
Yeah.
No, I'm curious about why, right? Like I would have asked the same question. Yeah. Well,
yeah. So first of all, this is more going to blunt the pain than you're going to completely not feel pain.
Yeah.
And you still have senses. You still can feel heat. You can feel cold. You got numb. And so it does blunt pain effectively. It does not eliminate all pain. You're not going to walk around, grab your hand on hot soap. You got your hand on. And frankly, if we ever got to a level of analgesia that was that much of it, probably pretty stiff, and not provide that.
So yeah. I remarked the first time we talked a couple of weeks ago that your disposition is like uncommonly cheery and pleasant. I mean, this is a tough business that we're in. I mean, you're working in a market that has, as you mentioned, big social implications that can, if you think about it long and hard, could bring you down, right? Like thinking about the opioid epidemic, for instance. I'm just curious, a totally personal question, but how do you maintain this disposition?
I mean, I think I have it naturally. I think I'm surprised that anyone can be a biotech CEO and not be naively optimistic all the time, because we enter a business where things fail 90% of the time. Right?
Well, I know.
What makes you think that this one's going to work? I believe. You got to be optimistic, right?
Yeah. But I mean, that could be cause. That stress, right? The acceptance of that risk could be cause for for concern enough to bring a guy down.
Well, and it is the hardest part of the job. I had this conversation with a colleague last night who's thinking about transitioning to a CEO role. And, obviously you have to have some level of technical capabilities and intelligence and background in drug development. So those check the box things. And then we talked a lot about the energy you need to be a CEO, right? That's I think clear. I think most people would say like, you just got to have energy, you got to have passion. And the thing that I raise is like, here's the last part that is hard, is the emotional roller coaster component. Mm-hmm. And this is a business like many businesses, but we have this these binary outcomes where the data is revealed or and stuff like that. And there's going to be ups and there's going to be downs. And I will tell you, what's been almost 10 years as a CEO in different times, you don't get better at riding that roller coaster. It's still euphoric when it's high and crushing when it's low. And I think I've gotten better at all the other aspects, of the job over time as you learn experience, but I haven't been able to get better at that. And you just have to ride the roller coaster, and then, sometimes it's not fun. Sometimes it is.
We talked about LTG 101. What could you tell us about, I guess, your pipeline beyond that, such as it is, and any sort of plans to add additional candidates?
Yeah, so we have a second compound in the clinic, 305. That's the one we're developing for chronic. The characteristics of the drug, the first compound is twice daily. The second compound is once daily. That makes more sense for acute and chronic pain. Actually, in acute pain, sometimes twice daily dosing is actually an advantage. Patients will tend to take the drug whenever they want, and so you want to have quick, onset, offset, so that they're not taking a once daily drug multiple times. But in chronic pain, you really would rather have a day dosing. So that's the second compound that's in the clinic. That's the one that's in phase 1 that will start arthritis studies later this year. We have a third NaV1.8 inhibitor that we're intending to bring into the clinic. What's exciting about that one for us is that it has the potential to have a really low dose, which gives you the opportunity to develop different formulations. And if you think about pain drugs that you would get even OTC, the opportunity to have a patch or a spray or something like that could be really interesting. But to do that, you have to have a very low amount of drug. And so that's the opportunity with the third clinic. We are continuing to work on other pain targets. I think we're very excited about NaV1.8, as you can tell. We've doubled down, tripled down in it, as you will, but we are also working on other pain targets. We're looking at one called ASIC, which is acid sensing ion channel, which is triggered when you have acid-driven pain. And there are obviously certain types of pain, like ischemic pain, that is cancer pain that is specifically often acid-driven, but also can be acid and NaV1.8 driven. So you have combination use as well to better block pain.
For those different delivery mechanisms that you mentioned, is that something you would work on in-house? Would you partner for those kinds of
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think those are things that we're still thinking through. I think, you could probably think about some early proof of concept work that you could do, demonstrating bioequivalence or the like, or technical feasibility. But yes, ultimately, those are probably would benefit from having partners.
What have you been doing here at JPM during JPM week? Like, what's been the agenda?
Getting steps in.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's happening regardless, right? It just comes, yeah.
Yeah, our focus. This is a great conference. I live in San Francisco, so it's always fun for me. I can pop over and go home when I need to.
Sleep in your own bed.
I have a hypothesis that JP Morgan week is the week that there are the most people in suits in San Francisco on the street. Is that accurate? Can you verify that?
I can verify that in 3 days here, you will see more people in suits than you will see in 362 days put together over 10 years. The rest of
okay,
10 years. Wow.
Yeah,
my hypothesis is a theory.
100%. No. I will also say that over the years of becoming JP Morgan, it's gotten more casual. So it used to be
I've noticed that too. Yeah.
suit and tie, right? And now we moved a few years back to like we won't have to wear ties. And now a lot of people wear sneakers. And this year I saw a lot of people not even wearing suits. Jacket, blazers, and sneakers. So that's definitely the trend.
Yeah. I like actually felt guilty about not wearing a tie today. I wore a tie the last 2 days, and I noticed, to your point, that I was one of the few guys with ties on. Ben's holding out.
Yeah, he's holding.
Yeah, I've been going back and forth a little bit. I'm not really sure which one is the right view, but I cut you off on JP Morgan and what your priorities.
Great conference, right? For a couple of reasons. So one, clearly the world's investment community is here. It's a good conference for meeting for investors, but honestly, there are other conferences where you have access to investors and a pretty regular cadence of those. This is one of the few conferences, where you can access strategics, pharma companies, and not just business development teams, but senior executives. And so that's really unique about this. And so the opportunity certainly to have conversations with strategics is a focus and need for this week.
Are those senior executives generally, I mean, that's the expectation of them while they're here, and how do you access them?
It is certainly the thing with the senior executives here in pharma is that they kind of have a million options to pick from, and they'll kind of go with what strikes their fancy, right? You can try to work with your colleagues in the business development team and see if there's enough excitement to get a C-suite executive to pop into your meeting. Sometimes they do come, sometimes they don't come. I think it'd be fun to be a pharma exec and just be like, look at my calendar for the day, like I want to go that one, that one, that one. I'll go half of this one, but that's kind of how it works. It is still speed dating, but it's still a unique kind of access.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, interest in certain therapeutic areas swings back and forth. Different things become hot, different things aren't. Or when there was a lot of reporting on opioid deaths and the CDC changed its guidance, I think there was a huge focus on non-opioid pain medications and a recognition of the need for them. Do you have a sense that that sentiment still exists and is still just as strong? Has it decreased? Has it increased?
Yeah, it's a great point because I mean we're seeing a national decrease in the number of opioid deaths, right? Certainly locally and nationally, and a lot of people are asserting that it's related to these efforts to reduce opioid prescriptions, and so we can look at it one of two ways. One is like it's getting better, we don't have to focus on it, or no, what we've been doing is actually working, and we should keep doubling down and pushing that because it's not like opioid deaths done. I mean, they're down maybe 20% from last year.
Yeah, they haven't disappeared.
But they haven't disappeared. It's still many X what they were 10 or 15, 20 years ago. So I think that the latter is where I'm hopeful, and I believe it is, which is these interventions that we've been putting in place are starting to work. Let's continue to double down, and we're seeing that snowball, and I think we're going to see continued decrease in opioid dependency translating to a lot of the societal levels that we see related to that as other non-opioid pain medicines become available. I think there'll become even greater incentive to be like, look, it's been working already. Now we have even more therapeutic options. We should be even stricter about letting opioids be used. Why should it even be allowed to have opioids be prescribed for low-risk surgical procedures? Okay. Why should we send an 18 to 20-year-old child, young adult, back to their college dorm with a bunch of opioids after a wisdom teeth extraction? We probably shouldn't let that happen.
Yeah, and I would imagine payers would think about it the same way, right? And when more therapies become available, I would think, that there would be a pretty strong push to prevent people from getting hooked to an opioid because it's costly.
It's costly. And, it's really easy to focus on, and we should, on the dependence component of opioids. But there are other issues with opioids, right? So obviously there's the nausea and constipation that they're well known for, but also just, intuitively, the CNS, the somnolence, the being out of it, right? And the impact that has. So one of the anecdotes that I was hearing is how surgeons are really, looking forward to a non-opioid, an additional non-opioid to add to the mix to reduce opioid use. Because if you think about how they're measured, it's often 30-day mortality and morbidity post-surgery. And if the surgery goes great, but you give someone an opioid, especially someone more elderly, and they're out of it and they have a fall, that's actually one of the things that brings people back into the hospital, and that counts against your mortality and morbidity on that operation, right? So there are a lot of concerns with opioids. The dependence is the obvious one, but even if you don't become dependent, you're not very functional, while you're.
Yeah. And are you finding that sort of the nuance of that story is being well received as well?
Yeah.
Or do people, is it just the big story that resonates?
It's I'd say that we're finding greater traction on the nuance of the story as people start to be like, no, actually, maybe this is a real opportunity. But there are still a lot of people who will say, like, it's not about opioid replacement. They're generic. The acute market's small. Who cares about these things? It'll be whether you develop a big neuropathic or musculoskeletal chronic indication. Yeah. But I think this opportunity to replace opioids for all these scenarios we're talking about is.
Yeah, well, I mean, the cost of generic opioids, I think, has been one of the challenges to overcome for alternatives, right?
Right.
I mean, how do you have to develop a medicine that is not so much more expensive that, an insurance company, for example, may end up choosing an opioid over your new drug that is not going to potentially get someone addicted and put them into a fog and
That's right.
cause them to fall and all sorts of other
That's
things.
right. I mean, look, you can make all those arguments that we just made about that. You can, have regulatory and government policy pressures to not let people just take the easy way out with the cheaper drug that has all these impacts. And you can also think about the big picture. If I've walked in, for most procedures, the range in cost, I'm not going to be, it's a 10, 15, 20,000, maybe $30,000 procedure I'm undergoing. And then for the cost of a $30 or $40 a day drug for a week, you're going to put them on an opioid. Right? In the context of the surgery, it's a very small percentage of the expense.
Yeah. We got a pretty good lay of the clinical plan for Latigo. Let's go post-show next
Yeah.
week. You're back in the office. Next steps, big thing you're working on, like what's on your agenda?
Yeah, sleep.
Same.
Yes.
Same.
But no, but
Take
seriously.
a few non-opioid analgesics and nap.
That's right. That's right. I think a couple things. So one is, the engagement you have with investors and strategics at a meeting like this is a two-way street. So one, obviously, we're telling our story, but we're hearing feedback about like, here's how we would do things, here's how we think about things. So I could just debrief with my team at lunch today, and we have 4 or 5 things we want to explore in some detail about how should we look at that potential indication. What would a proof of concept look like in that idea? What kind of study could we run? How do we want to think about this timing of the study? So there's some of these like concrete things, and actually, it can be draining as a CEO to be constantly doing the pitch, whether it's an event, but you can get feedback back that's useful. And in an event like this, you do. So there are a few things that we want to explore. So that's the kind of unique thing coming out of the conference. The other thing, of course, is between the holidays and JP Morgan, just getting back into, good operational planning, tracking our objectives, and being back in the flow of the operations.
Also same. Yeah. We find ourselves just rolling right out of the holidays into JPM, and we get back and it's like, okay, let's get grounded. Let's get grounded. Yeah. Well, that's about all the time we have for today, but there's so much more to talk about. We'd love to have you back on the show at some point to talk about what's going on there and clinical progress. I appreciate you taking time out of your super busy schedule to spend with us.
This has been great. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, so have we.
Ben, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. So that's Latigo Therapeutics CEO Nima Farzan. I'm Matt Pillar.
And I'm Ben Comer.
And you just listened to the Business of Biotech from JPM 2025, also from the beautiful law offices of Alston and Beard. Thank you to Alston and Beard for hosting us this week. Listen and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure you take in our video casts under the Listen Watch tab at Bioprocess Online, or under the Business of Biotech tab that is on lifescienceleader.com. We drop every Monday, so we'll see you next week, and thanks for listening.